bargaining over wages is still a subject of bargaining and safety issues, and if you just kind of say, which we've seen in some cases already in Ohio, which is, oh, okay, well, we made you cover 15% of your healthcare costs, and we did this and that, so what we'll do is we'll raise your pay to kind of replace that. Well, that doesn't answer the mail. It doesn't fix the problem. So it really takes the kind of political will to, going forward to really make sure that those folks are representing taxpayers at the table, which is what they're supposed to be doing, but they don't oftentimes. So what we've seen in Wisconsin, with all the hullabaloo about Wisconsin, is it's frankly saving jobs and it's balancing budgets. And so school districts in the post-implementation phase now that have negotiated contracts, what they've not had to lay off a single teacher. They've been able to balance budgets and not actually make any programmatic cuts. So it's allowing them to really do what they need to do to get their budgets aligned without getting rid of a single teacher or cutting any programs. So that's the early results out of Wisconsin. It's good, it's favorable, but you know, Wisconsin's also an indicator of where that isn't the case, where again, the folks at the table on the management side aren't representing taxpayers. You know, they're doing what you expect them to do, wanting to raise taxes and do all those types of things and not make the tough decisions. Nobody wants to make tough decisions. It's human nature to abhor conflict, right? We don't want to be the bad person. Nobody wants to play bad cop. It's never the fun thing to be. But again, we're in a fiscal crisis that requires that kind of responsibility in seriousness. So we've seen good things out of Wisconsin, but again, it takes that political will long after any vote happens on November.
If it's okay with the panel, we're going to go ahead and jump directly to the audience questions because we've got a fair amount. So either we got really smart, or you got really stupid, or it's just a joke. And none of you are laughing at my jokes, which are horrifically awful tonight. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. I'm going to start with you, Melanie. The question is, what is the website that has the interview segments on it? That was what you mentioned in your opening statement. And I'm going to go ahead and ask you this question if you can answer it. Do public school teachers in Ohio retire with a yearly pension that is at least 75% of their year's final salary?
I think, in answer to the second one, that depends on the school district. I don't know what the average is. I haven't done that research. But there is a point that needs to be made in terms of, if I could expand on what the question is asking in concept, the employment of teachers. There are some pieces of SB 5 that were put into the budget bill that is now already effective as of July 1st. The performance evaluation system, doesn't matter if SB 5 passes or not. That piece is, in fact, the timeline has been stepped up. The State Board of Education has to have a framework in place for local districts to use by December of this year, December 31st. So that piece is moving forward, whether or not, so if you're talking to friends and family who are teachers, and they're concerned about the performance evaluation piece of SB 5, it doesn't make any difference because that was pulled out and put into the budget bill anyway. That's going forward. I attended a meeting in August from some of the state school board members in the Department of Ed, and that piece actually has been worked on for a number of years now, so it's not a brand new idea that they're just jumping into. It's been in the process for quite some time. Oh, the website is ivoters.com. It has fair questions, and both sides are asked to answer the exact same questions, and you can get a reflective viewpoint from both sides of issue 3. The pro side of issue 2, and as soon as the no side on issue 2 will sit down with us, we'll post that as well.
On the pension piece, the answer to that is likely no. It all depends on the teacher's years of service. If it's 30 years, then it's usually going to be around 66% of their pay in that final 3-year average. If they work longer than that, it could get up above 75%, but the vast majority, that's not the case. So you keep in mind, Senate Bill 5 has actually nothing to do with that. So that doesn't impact it at all. In terms of the pension issue, you know, STRS, which is the teacher's pension, today has 58 cents for every dollar in liabilities. So for every dollar they owe, they have 58 cents to pay. Their own auditors have said that they cannot, if there are not significant reforms made, reforms mean cuts to future retirees' pensions, or the employer share gets jacked up, they cannot meet their obligations over the next 30 years. I mean, you could actually read that. It's a CAF called a CAFR, CFR. You can actually read it for yourself. You know, all this stuff, people think I just make it up, but you can go read it, and it says it right there in the document. I think the one says they can't meet their liability to infinity, which is a long time.
Thanks, Matt. Just in regard to kind of stick to the pension theme, one of the questions is, does Senate Bill 5 address the issue of double dipping? And the answer to that is no. It really doesn't address much of the pension issue at all, except for the public pension pickup that Matt referenced earlier. The pension reform bill is expected to be heard. It's being technically heard right now in a committee called the Ohio Retirement Study Committee, but it's expected to be heard in front of the General Assembly sometime late this fall, if not early next year. So watch for that. It's going to be another big debate, I think, across the state. And Matt, I want to come back to you. The question from the audience is comment on law enforcement personnel working overtime in the last 3 years to pump up their retirement.
Yeah, I mean, that's pay spiking. Then don't pick on law enforcement. I mean, that happens, you know, in any kind of one of the government units. It happens in the state workers, because overtime is considered part of your highest 3 year. And so that's just one of the realities of the current system, that it applies to that 3 year average. So what happens is people, it's called pay spiking. They, you know, get that high last 3 years, and it doesn't even have to be the last 3 years. There's a nurse in the state system. He averaged 200 grand a year over 3 years by working well over 100,000 in overtime, just in overtime, for 3 years. Doesn't matter now. He'll never make that in a single year in terms of his wage. So when he hits his magic number of 30 at age 52, he can retire and he'll have about $144,000 pension with the 3% COLA guaranteed till he dies. So that issue is not just a law enforcement thing, it applies to the whole kind of government piece. So it's just a reality. And again, I would put that back on, hey, manage your force, right? Don't let folks get overtime, because it's going to be probably cheaper if you just added a police or state worker or whatever it might be, instead of letting folks double work that kind of overtime. So that's, again, a management failure.
All right, we're going to come back to Melanie. I'm not trying to leave you out, Dana. Just trying to keep it to the subject matter at hand. The question is several about schools, and the question, I'm going to combine them here. The question is about how much of the local money is paid for by the state, and how much of that local money voted on is actually going to the local district. I'd like you to comment on that, the impact of Senate Bill 5 and State Issue 2 on tenure, if you can remember these. And then comment, there's a question around why Canton has built real big buildings and has no funds to operate them. I referenced the same type of thing happening in Huber Heights. So if you can remember all three of those, if not, I'll remind you, but they're all in the area of school policy. Melanie, wait.
Well, on the facility issue, a lot of districts will get their fundings or get significant help for, in addition to what they ask the locals to pay through the Schools Facilities Commission. So that piece is not in Senate Bill 5 in terms of the cost of operating. That's not a personnel of a contract issue. And you can help me stop at the first two.
That's okay.
Tenure. Teacher tenure is protected continues to be protected under Senate Bill 5 for those who are currently tenured. And the concept is when you make the agreement to put someone in a tenured position, you keep it. It would be from the time that Senate Bill 5 would go into effect, no new tenured teachers would gain that position. So the concept of affecting tenure for those who are currently tenured, there is no effect. But there would be no additional tenured status given to teachers. And we're working backwards.
That's okay. The final question was about how much of the local money raised through local levies is paid. Does the state match that, or are they paying 100% more?
The school funding system is extraordinarily complex, and depends on what's called phantom revenue. All kinds of factors factor into a particular district's what percentage they get from the state, what percentage stays with them locally, etc. The Department of Education has a very nice database. If you want to look at your particular district as to how much is state share, how much is local share, how much is federal share, and they would also, and you can just plug in, your district, and it gives you there's all types of fiscal data. If you go on to it's www.ode.state.oh.us, or you can email us at Roundtable. I'll get the link to you. And then you just go under frequently asked questions or the fiscal data, and it'll get you a link to what they call a data warehouse. There's all types of information, and you can get that question answered very specifically for your particular school district in that fashion.
If I can expand on that for a minute, I believe in Canton for sure. Everybody, it's pretty much just the southeast portion of the state. A couple very small rural communities that are underneath a certain millage point that causes this phenomena that Melanie calls phantom revenue. So generally speaking, in most of the districts, and I did not look it up before I came, but Canton I believe would be one of those, when you vote on a local tax levy, there really is technically no match from the state. The state is already funding it. You've already met your local match requirements, so this is additional money that's coming in from the locality for the local schools. What the questioner may have been thinking of, and I'm going to make this quote caveat, is when building the school buildings, there was a state match depending on the wealth of the district. So depending on when it was that you all voted on that, there may have been a match from that, just to be totally clear with you, but for whoever had that question, I hope that helps. I'm going to come to you, Dana. What's the reality for Ohioans if State Issue 2 fails?
Well, I think the reality would be, fortunately, the Republicans still control the legislature and we still have a Republican government. So I do think if we lose this battle on Issue 2 now, that the battle will go on. So that's half part of it. If it doesn't pass, however, or if we can't retain SB 5, there will be a continual drift, especially in manufacturing companies. Those that can move will choose to move. You know, on the service side, service sector, wherever there's people, there's services provided. So the service jobs will stay. Probably the profits will be affected more so. But those companies that have the ability to move will probably continue to drift away.
Okay, excellent. Matt, I'm going to come to you in just a minute, but I would just remind folks that America's for Prosperity, Dana's a volunteer participant. We don't, Republican, Democrat, I would point out that Matt has said both parties have been guilty of creating the spending phenomenon in Ohio, but I think you're right. If State Issue 2 goes down, our position would be, and I think this could be borne out with facts, that will continue to drive a regulatory and tax environment that you'll see private sector jobs leave the state. You're absolutely correct. I would also say, just briefly, I would normally say this in my closing remarks, but if State Issue 2 goes down, and these are the types of reforms you care for, I actually think that you're going to see a chilling of the legislature. Maybe not the governor, but of the legislature, because politics is politics. And there's going to be an effect that they will be not as likely to take on large reform again. And so if you're interested, this is an issue that everybody must be engaged on. Matt, I want to come to you. How has the NLRB weighed in on the bill, the referendum petition, and the issue of the wording? And how has President Obama himself, has he weighed in on the bill? This is a long question. Basically, are they going to police the honesty or lack thereof of this issue, and have they weighed in?
They haven't weighed in and they won't. NLRB really looks at the private sector union issues. The State Employment Relations Board is really what governs state public sector collective bargaining. The president has commented in a general political sense in support of the unions and therefore against Issue 2. But I mean that's expected. So no big deal there. I'm not sure if that's it. I mean, it's not an issue for the NLRB. NLRB is too busy making sure Boeing can't open up a plant in South Carolina and making sure that everyone has to have posters in their workplace and making sure that that employers have a harder time fighting organization campaigns. So they're not worried about government workers at this point.
All right, Melanie, we're going to come to you. When public employees are sick, off sick, are they paid? Question from the audience.
It almost sounds too simple of a question. Yes, if they have accumulated sick days that they can bank on, they're paid for the time that they're off. Sick. Yeah. Am I missing something?
Nope, you're not missing anything. That's what the audience wanted to know. Matt, how many school employees aren't eligible for health care, if you have the data, are not eligible for health